Nerds Out of Water is a podcast brought to you by two tech professionals and long-term friends, Michael Lobb and myself, David Camus. We have both worked in many technical careers and have switched to running and owning our own businesses, taking them out of our little fish ponds and putting those businesses into an ocean of sharks. Michael runs TeamScale, whose mission it is to reduce the risk in software development projects. He allows visionary founders and talented developers to deliver amazing software on time and on budget.
And thanks, David. David runs One Bright Cloud, who has a view towards a future where AI is commonplace and autonomous vehicles provide transportation to your location with the smallest energy footprint. From time to time, we'll be joined by guests ranging from business owners to technologists and every role in between. We challenge our own perspectives and we try to see things from each other's perspective. You don't always need to agree, we don't, but after listening to this podcast, you'll definitely have an idea.
And just before we go on, this episode was brought to you by Reto to Hope. Say no to drugs, no to alcohol, and if you have a problem, Reto to Hope is Australia offering of free drug and alcohol rehabilitation. Call 0421 949 948. That's Reto to Hope on 0421 949 948.
David, our guest today is someone who I've interviewed before in the first season of Nerds Out of Water. Anthony Bowers is a BPO professional who specialises in providing HR and business process outsourcing to Australia and the rest of the world. He's built dozens of high-performing teams around the Philippines for clients around the globe, and he's extremely adept at working across cultural teams and loves to get the most out of people. When I first interviewed Anthony, it was in a situation where the world was normal, and then we had 2020. And remote working became a lot more popular and a lot more accepted. We're talking to Anthony today to catch up on what's been happening. Welcome to Anthony Bowers.
You're listening to Nerds Out of Water with Michael Lobb and David Camus.
Hi, Anthony. It's been a year or so since we spoke last time, and I just wanted to welcome you back to our podcast. You've been stuck in Sydney over the last year or so.
Yes, I have. Like most Sydney-siders, we've been stuck. There are different levels of stuckness, if that's a word. So I had the pleasure of being stuck in one of the zones. I was a Southie in the South Zone in DY. And it was really interesting to see the tribalism. So you had the Southies and the Northies, and we were split by the Narrabeen Bridge.
North and south of
North
the
and
river.
south. It was almost Shakespearean. two different houses separated by a bridge.
Oh, dear.
But, sorry,
I don't want to ask.
No, look, it was it's fascinating. I mean, it was one of those crazy years. I mean, this is one for the record books for sure. And I think everyone's seen the memes of history teachers trying to teach 2020 and 2040. I think it'll be a fascinating year to look back on. I don't think there's any other way to put it. So I have been in Sydney and doing my best to try and reconnect with this city and this country because I've been away for so long. So.
And now we're starting to see COVID babies appearing at the hospitals. That's the babies born during COVID.
Amazing, right? Amazing.
Yes.
And I think we might see a bit of a bump there.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what I mean. We are seeing a bump.
No double entendre intended. But I mean, and it's. I was talking about this the other day with my favorite coffee shop across the road, Twist, and we were just talking about what effect this will have on on people. And my sort of take on it is that 2021 will be when we finally sort things out gradually and slowly. Eventually, the vaccine will roll out and life will get back to normal. But I think 2022 is just going to be a wild year. I think 2022 is when people break free, and I think we're very basic creatures when you peel away the onions of everything. That humans are basic creatures at the end of the day, and if you coop someone up and you coop a whole world up, there's going to be a real reaction. So I'm looking forward very much to the tail end of 21 and 2022. I think it's going to be a great time to be alive.
How have your team been doing without you? I know that when I asked you this question a few weeks ago, you said better, but in reality, like you're separated from your team in the Philippines, and I guess a few of your clients as well. You're probably not able to visit them as much. How has that affected them?
Yeah, it's there are many different angles to that. So where do I start? Running a small business is a very humbling experience, and I mean that without any sickliness or tackiness or Simon Sinek click likingness. It's truly humbling. And one of the things that I've realized is that essentially I've created something where I'm not needed.
That's good.
Yeah. So I have great people that run talent, great people over in Cebu who, my general manager who runs a very tight ship, who's really on top of all aspects of the business, from the finances to the HR to the government regulations in the Philippines and around the world to that point. So she's quite excellent. I have a fantastic client engagement manager who is very, very sharp and follows up with me and keeps me not on my toes isn't the word, but keeps me on top of everything if I slip. And I trust them completely. So the business is run by them, essentially. So, of course, it's been incredibly difficult being separated from them, right? And separated from the business and separated from the staff, because you grow attached to your staff. So we're a sort of a, we're not a 10,000 seat call center. Like, we're a small specialized BPO, and we do grow attached to the staff, and there's very low churn. That's been hard. So the actual day in, day out hard nuts of running the business is well taken care of, both from the staffing level and the client facing level. I don't have any problem with that, but I have a massive problem with the soft part of it. In that, I want to be with my staff. I want to be doing team building activities. And finally, it's cobbler's shoes. I should be great at it. We're a remote staffing company, right? But it's
Very
like,
good point.
But at the same time, I mean, what we've realized is why clients engage with us is that they want to create a physical community, but remotely.
Yeah.
So it's not like a remote community remotely. It's an office that gets switched on overseas. So that's been a tough one. As far as clients go, there are many clients that I've never seen. So that's not such an issue. But then there are other clients that I love spending time with that I haven't been able to because of COVID. So it's been a hurly-burly year.
So you've worked some time, obviously, in Hong Kong and the Philippines.
Yeah.
How do you feel that small business over there is actually coping? Not your small business as such, but small business in general.
I've spent 20 years overseas. So I did 10 years in mainland China, and I did 10 in Hong Kong, with sort of the last 7 being a mix of Hong Kong and the Philippines. What I've been impressed about, so it was definitely a massive impact, right? We know that because we lost clients at the beginning of COVID. A huge impact on small businesses. What I've been impressed by is the resilience of companies and people. Right, that has really impressed me, and I think that is something about humans in general, and societies to different extents, is that they do find a way to get through things, no matter how dire. I was actually listening to a wonderful podcast called The History of Rome. It was fascinating about the Romans that they just didn't stop. No matter what happened, they just kept going. And no matter how dire the situation, they just kept going. They were relentless. And I can't say that from my experience with the Philippine companies about it being relentless, but what I sure have seen is that they have found ways to cope no matter what the situation is. So I can give you one example, this is my company, but it's a great example of how people get through. So I've got a CAT operator who works for a company in Sydney. He was stuck in the middle of nowhere, wherever it was. He wasn't in the office, but he was able to team view into the computer that he uses to do the CAT operation from his village, from a mobile, for the data, and was able to keep working while he was out of the office. And I think he eventually got a LAN connected somehow, 10, 15 meter LAN from his computer to a neighbor's house or something. you find a way, right?
Yep,
you find a way.
Indeed.
Now he's back in the office now, and that's great. But I was just so impressed with that. And and I think that story is replicated across the BPO industry in the Philippines and across all industries in Asia and throughout the world. Is that people have found a way to cope under really difficult circumstances, and that's pretty impressive.
And I think that resilience of learning to cope and digressing what your own business is doing. It was all around the world. Doesn't matter whether you're locked at home, locked in a village, or wherever. You just make it work. It's a great learning.
It totally is. It totally is, and it's amazing what you can achieve when the chips are down. And that's what I've learned from that, and that things can be done even when you think they can't. Right, and you don't know until you actually do it. And that was impressive for me, and it also was a sort of for our business, because it's a very difficult thing to actually say what we do. And people say, "Do you do software development?" Well, no, we don't do software development, but we provide software developers. Do you do architecture? No, but we have CAT operators. Do you do accounting? Well, no, but we've hired tons of them for clients. And the conclusion I've come to is what we do is HR. And we do it really well. So we do all aspects of the HR well, including the soft stuff. And that's something that really came into focus during this pandemic and this problem, is that talent was there. When I say talent, I mean my people in Cebu, Evelyn and Mitch and all the others, reassuring our staff, motivating them, letting know that we're there for them, making sure that talent culture was maintained throughout 2020, and there's something very powerful there. So it's a very soft thing, but it's a very powerful thing, and often you can't see it, or sometimes not really be able to put a proper value on it, except in these difficult circumstances where that really shines through, where the staff wanted to be reassured, they wanted to know they had a backup, they wanted to make to know that we were there for them. And that the clients were there for them, and that we were going to get through this together. I thought it was fantastic.
I don't think I've been to so many virtual Christmas parties ever. I don't think I've ever been to a virtual Christmas party until this year, and I think we went to 4 or 5, and that goes to personal life as well. I have virtual dinners now with my family around Australia and the UK, and we actually enjoy it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Well, I had a virtual thing with TeamScale. Which was great, and I got told to get lost by the transvestite that was doing the show, because she thought I was recording her, when in fact I was just on a video call with Mike's team. But I just happened to be at this pub where there was a show going on.
That makes more sense.
Yes. Yes, that would. Yeah, without the last qualifying part, the first part would have been very weird. But that was my first sort of virtual Christmas dinner. So it was wow.
At one point, I did think you were talking about Michael then, but anyway.
No. But it was an experience, and again, I think done well, they're great.
Yeah.
Right. I think there are a lot of ways that you can make remote Christmas parties and remote anything work really well, but you have to work at it like anything.
Yeah. And you've been doing a lot of town halls and things with your team as well, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we get together, and they, like I said, like me, they're not super focused or regimented, but we just get on, we have a chat, have a laugh.
Yeah.
You know, how's
Are there any
everything?
other
Everything's
tools
great.
that you've
It's really-
found? Are there any other tools that you found to be helpful during, remote working that you've picked up on?
Look, no, just the normal stuff, but a lot more of it. So things like, Hangouts we're using a lot, and, the screen sharing, et cetera, that we may not have used before very much, but we do now. So they've just become far more front and center. What I've noticed mainly is a change in attitude towards these tools rather than the tools themselves. So, for example, with Zoom or whatever, I would have been mortified if someone knew that I was at home. So I'm mortified. I remember really early on, my son had walked past the camera when I was on a call, and I just wanted to melt, right? Wanted to melt. And now I'm like, yeah, no, this is just how it is.
Yeah.
I'm at home, my
It
son's
isn't it?
here, my family's here, the cat's going to jump around, it's what it is. And I've liked that. That's refreshing. I've liked that remote work, and this is from a purely selfish business point of view, that remote work is no longer on the exterior. It's very much front and center. And who'd have thunk that the digital transformation in 2020 would be driven by COVID. A virus has driven digital transformation in companies.
And people all over the world have realised, it's not so hard after all.
Correct.
That's right.
Correct.
I've not seen, we work with a lot of large government organisations, and I'm surprised at how many security people had to really work out how to allow Zoom and all of the other video capabilities to go through firewalls, because nearly all governments in Australia didn't have the permission of external video conferencing.
Yes.
So it's a simple, oh my God, what do we have to do to remove ports, to allow port usage?
Yeah, exactly. And it was interesting to see how Zoom itself had to change its security requirements because of naughty school children deciding to do funny things on cameras, etc., when they shouldn't. But again, it's just been one of those years where technology, it's been there, but suddenly it's become front and center.
And mental health as well. I mean, without it, there'd
yeah.
be people who would not able to communicate with other people. So I think that's helped in keeping people alive in some respects, because they've had that facility to be able to talk to people. Whereas, if this was in the 80s or earlier, we wouldn't have had that. Completely.
I think mental health and isolation, etc., is a dire issue and a real problem around COVID, and Zoom and Hangouts and whatever you're using for your communication is a great tool to help keep that sense of community. And whether that's your business community or a community where you live or whatever it is, it's really, really important.
And as always, when we talk about mental health, let's also provide the Beyond Blue capabilities and who we support. So Beyond Blue, their phone number is 1300 22 4636. That's 1300 22 4636. And don't ever be afraid to give them a call, whatever you're feeling.
Absolutely. Mental health is something that we need to be able to have open and honest discussions about, and without the stigma.
That's right. Agreed. So, in relation to remote staffing, you're highly experienced in that. Have you noticed any increase, decrease on Western reliance on it?
That's a really interesting. Question. It ebbs and flows, and it's ebbed and flowed forever since it started. Now, remote working, offshoring, rather than outsourcing, if we're going to get technical about it. So outsourcing's been done since bookmakers have made books and sent off the glue to the gluers. That's outsourcing. Offshoring in the Philippines, has a start date. I think it's 1992. I think if I remember rightly, with Accenture in Makati, and that's where it began. So I think that was time zero. Correct me if I'm wrong, and send me emails and whatever. But I think I'm correct in saying that date and the people. And it's gone through different iterations, David. So you had the sort of the very early adopters sort of exploring and, what is this light bulb electricity thing? What is it? How do we use it and stuff? It then got, I think, unfortunately picked up on by CFOs around the world. And they were like, great, we're going to get rid of everyone and we're going to put them all in the Philippines. We're going to put them all in India and it'll be perfect. It'll be wonderful. And of course, it was a disaster, right? If you only look at cost when you're looking at offshoring, then you are bound to fail. I think the latest iteration is a much more sensible one. And that goes to this ebbing and flowing, where businesses know that they can't remove all of their local staff, and it's a really silly thing to do. But at the same time, they can be looking at offshoring as a way of augmenting their staff numbers and allowing them to compete. So I'm very comfortable with what we do because I think that Australian businesses who use offshoring allow themselves to be competitive against international forces. And that's very important. Now, as far as like this year, there has been some businesses pulling back. So there's a couple of the contact centers have moved back, and that was because their contact centers were shut down overnight, literally overnight. So their I won't name names, but their operations managers are getting calls at 3 a.m. saying we have no support. It doesn't exist anymore, right? And I think that's a wake up call regarding over reliance. I just think that's across whatever we're talking about. I think any business that is solely reliant on one source of supply that's a business critical thing. I think that's a mistake. I think you have to have different sources. Where if we're talking about HR, that means having some of your team in Australia, some overseas. That would be, I think, it's a sensible way of looking at it and the correct way of doing it. And it works beautifully. And I love seeing it. I love seeing the teams working together. I love seeing our teams feel that they're part of the local company, part of their culture, and we provide the mechanism to make that happen. And great things happen when businesses take that attitude and invest time in it.
Do you think that it's helped the way that people accept outsourcing? That's
another really fascinating one. We're getting onto some real touch points here. So, I often say that, there's some fairly strong opinions about what we do. I think that broadly, an acceptance of remote working will lead to an acceptance of offshoring. And I think, or what I know, in my years of doing offshoring are the deep bonds that form between onshore and offshore teams if it's done right. Now, if it's done where we're going to get rid of all of the local staff and it's all going overseas, then there is no bond. There is just an ugliness, right? Why wouldn't there be? If you're there trying to train up the person that's taking your job, that is a very unpleasant thing. If you're there training the person that is going to augment your role, so I'm thinking of the large software development teams that we've rolled out that were enormously successful, right? Where you've had someone that is, say, a mid-level programmer that's moving into a team lead position, suddenly they've got 10 to 15 people under them. That is a opportunity that is very rare in Australia or America or wherever it is for a local team, but is very doable when you're using an offshore team. And so that really raises the game of the local staff and gives them great opportunities. It helps the companies be able to increase their productivity while maintaining control of the bottom line. And it's a win all round. It keeps it competitive. So circling back to the point, I think that once people have used offshore teams, once they have formed bonds with their staff, and once they've realized that staff member is there to help that company grow and strengthens their position, then there is acceptance. I think it was Mark Twain that said, travel is a great cure for prejudice. And here I would say actually having an offshore staff member, an offshore team member is a great cure of prejudice of that. And especially in the latest iteration of offshoring, where companies realize that they will be keeping their staff, that their local staff have immense value, a lot of it in the heads, that should be, and it goes to what is a great thing of offshoring in that a lot of the companies talk to don't have procedures written down, don't have run books, don't have things ordered, and offshoring forces that to happen. You have to have everything codified for it to work properly, and it's a beautiful thing.
You were talking, and that leads into another question that I've got about how far down the line do you think we are on the BPO to KPO road, where your BPO is more about process orientation and driving workflow, whereas your KPOs, your knowledge processes are like more about making decisions and making creative decisions on how things are progressing.
Yeah. Where to start on that one? The BPO industry exists because of technology, right? It's as simple as that. As software has moved into the cloud, so your server is no longer under the stairs, probably a good thing, right? Because, don't tell me your security is better than Microsoft or whoever's doing it. But as it's moved into the cloud, so the chains of location have broken down. So we know we're no longer chained to a location regarding where things are done, right? And if that's the case, then we can look globally for our HR, and should. I've always thought it's an absolute nonsense that businesses are told that they must compete in the international market. So that's the mantra that we're told. You need to compete. You have to compete. It doesn't matter where it's coming from, if it's from India, China, whatever, you must compete. And then when a business tries to be competitive by using offshoring, it's, that's wrong. Well, no, hang on. Well, what is it? We either are totally closed or we're open. This in-between one is a very hard thing to do. So, sorry, I digress.
That's okay.
Back to it. So the technology has allowed the BPO industry to exist, and so it will be the cause of its downfall, right? And I don't mean that as a bad thing, but as the downfall of a certain type of work that is done in the BPO industry. So that cookie cutter data collection, data copying, data scraping, data management, I think will all be done by computers and AI in about 15 to 20 years. It's already starting.
You think that long?
I do, for it to be complete. So it's already starting. Okay. It's already starting, but it'll be commonplace in 10, 15, 20 years. It just that role will not exist anymore. I think the robotic voice operations that we see out of Google won't fly. I just think there's this uncanny valley weirdness about talking to a computer that sounds like a human that won't be accepted. But that's my personal opinion. So I think there'll still be voice work. I could be wrong, but I would not like to have a conversation with a computer that sounds like a human. It's just something that strikes me as just odd about that. Could just be me, and I could be completely wrong. It'd be interesting to see where that goes. But the BPO industry, as it is now, will be obliterated by technology. So then, what's left, and what it is KPO, right? And again, it's that transition, and that familiarity. So people have used offshore staff, they've realized what's capable, and they've realized, the capability that's out there, and those people will move up the chain. So they're no longer just doing data entry; they're doing data analysis. They're no longer just doing, accounting and recording. They're doing investigation work or consultative work on that accounting. So the nature of the role invariably will move to KPO, both through the historical relationships between the client and the staff member, the maturing of the idea of what can be achieved. So not the maturing of the staff are already mature and capable. It's the maturing of the client countries and the client businesses to understand what is capable out there. That there are people, and of course there are, that can come in and run your IT department. Right? We've hired people that would very easily slot into any CTO role in the Fortune 500 companies with ease. And that's just a matter of people getting used to that. So, yes, KPO is the future. BPO will no longer exist as it is now. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But there'll still be room for hiring people remotely, but the roles will be vastly different. And I think that will sort of align with changes of work everywhere in the world. So what work will be left? If everything robotic is done, well, what is there? Well, then it's creative stuff. Mm-hmm. It's the creative industries, et cetera, that are going to thrive in the future. And I don't see there's any reason why that can't be done in an offshore model. So I'm very confident.
I think I agree fully with your voice statement about speaking to computers in its current form.
It's creepy.
I don't believe it will carry on. But I think it will have to evolve and will evolve to a point where we may not even be able to identify it. But I think that's quite a way down the track.
And then we get into regulatory things. Is it right to continue things? Now, I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, but I remember what was the Facebook program that they shut down for the AI? Was it Facebook? Google?
Oh, where they developed their own language.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, nothing to see here, folks. It's all good. We're just going to shut the whole thing down. It's like, okay. And I thought that was fascinating. So I think there are areas where that can we do it? Yes. Should we do it? Well, we need to really seriously consider it.
If you think about computers and robotics mimicking your voice, we use voice recognition on a number of government websites now. If you now have a computer mimicking you, there's a problem.
You bet. And also deep fake videos. I mean, that's terrifying.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Right.
It's terrifying, but it's also, hey, the last episode of The Mandalorian had a great spoiler alert in it.
Yeah?
Okay. With using deepfake.
Am I allowed to say it? Because I don't want to spoil it for anyone that hasn't seen it.
I've said the spoiler alert thing.
Spoiler
alert. Yeah, are we talking about Luke coming in?
Yeah.
Yeah, man, of course. Like it was great.
It was fantastic.
It was absolutely fantastic, and I loved that. And
I liked that better than I liked the Rogue One CG version of Tarkin and Princess Leia.
Me too. They didn't quite hit it. So Luke's deep fake thing hit the spot for me as well. Although, funny enough, I'm going to come out here and say something controversial. My favorite Star Wars is Rogue One. There we go. I've said it.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. Empire Strikes Back and Rogue One are great for me.
Empire Strikes Back. It's got to be the best one.
Although I kind of thought, I felt a little bit for the people in Holland because Darth Vader means Dark Father in Dutch. So they kind of knew. And I've always felt for them in a sort of way. But I digress. We shouldn't go down the Star Wars rabbit hole because then that's all we'll talk about for 5 hours.
Could be on here for 5 hours. Yeah.
Forever.
Now, I am I'm the treasurer of Scale, which is a premier travel agency group. You mentioned travelling a little while ago in one of our questions. Can I ask you when you think we're going to be able to travel again?
Yeah. Been talking to our lawyers in the Philippines about it just the other day because it's like, when can we get back? I would say August of this year is when it's going to be easy
August
to travel.
2021.
August 2021, I think, is when it's going to become easier to travel. But it's quite incredible. Have you checked the pricing to get to Hong Kong?
Yeah.
Oh, not Hong Kong, but I have other places.
It's like
It's insane.
I'll sell everything I've got, and I'll still have the shirt on me back for the trip. It's maybe.
No, you're lucky.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, so I mean that there's the ability to travel, and then there's doesn't make sense. And it's an interesting one because we used to fly around all the time, and it's like, well, maybe we have to think about that, about whether it's necessary to actually physically go there. Again, it's cobbler's shoes. Right? I should be the one saying, who needs to fly? It's nonsense. You can do everything remotely, and you can.
Apart from the soft and touchy-feely stuff.
The touchy-feely soft stuff, yeah.
And Anthony,
Sure.
when we had our team there in the Philippines, that having face-to-face time is really important, I think. And even this year with the team in Vietnam, not being able to visit them has been, we miscommunicate sometimes, and that's a problem. Whereas prior to that, when I was traveling 3 or 4 times a year, you'd build that relationship up, and you'd get to know each other's little foibles, and you'd understand what people were talking about when they said specific things. So you get used to the way that they communicate.
Humans are funny creatures, right? We're very simple creatures. At the end of the day, we crave connection, and part of that is that physical connection. And again, it goes back to the maturing of the industry and the maturing of how we understand that things work. Because remember, this has only been going on for 30 years, offshoring and in offshoring via countries. It's still very young, very young. I think what we've come to understand is that you do need that mix. You do need that physical presence when you can go and visit your team, do so, but also utilize the fact that they are remote where you can. So it's not 100% remote. It's not 100% physical. It's a mix, and that balance needs to be worked out between client and team.
Anthony, if you could change something, February 2020, so just prior to the pandemic coming through and being big news, what would you change?
I don't want to talk about regrets or looking back. I mean, we lost a really major client in February 2020, right? And I didn't see it coming. It came
Due to COVID?
Due to COVID, right? And I thought I had my bases covered, etc. If I could do something again, it'd be having a far more thorough forensic in my client's exposure to COVID. And I didn't see it. I didn't see it for this particular client, who was our biggest client, and we lost that person. And that if I would have done anything different, it would have been to pay far more attention to that possibility. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of small business owners make in not potentially being aware of hidden threats that are out there. So that would have been the thing that I would have concentrated far more on, because it was a massive shock to the system.
But I think that's the same with small, medium and large business. One Bright Cloud, we looked at this situation and now we look back retrospectively. We didn't think we had all of our eggs in one basket. We had travel industry, we had private business, and we had government industry.
Yeah.
And we lost major contracts right across the board. So I think we're all in a very similar position to what you just said. And we're looking back to going, how could we have resolved that? How could we expose or hide the exposure on that sort of, mitigate the exposure on that sort of issue?
Yeah. It's a tough one because you have conflicting needs. And those needs need to be resolved. And I just couldn't put the rope together for this client. I didn't see that his business would be so badly affected. I didn't see that he would not allow people doing remote work from home, right? And there was no budging. I didn't even think that would be an issue. What didn't I? But I didn't ask. So I was there blithely going along, thinking that things were a certain way, and they're actually a completely different way. And I only found out when it was way too late.
Yeah,
and that was a huge mistake, a learning curve.
Well, one more question from me, if I may.
Sure.
You've just mentioned one thing that you would have looked back on and changed. Is there anything else you would have changed about how your team handled the pandemic during the pandemic time?
Look, I can't fault them, actually. I mean, I'm trying to think of something that I'd like them to do differently, but the team,
great answer,
I thought were brilliant. Through enormous problems. So we've had team members lose family members, all that sort of stuff. But I think it was a combined effort between talent, our staff at Talent. When I say talent executives, the talent staff, and the clients, all very much collaborating to make things work and just getting things done. So
that's really good on your team.
Yeah,
great answer.
Yeah, and I'm not being supercilious or whatever the word is. If I could think of something, I would, but I can't fault them.
You said at the beginning that that they run the company and it's run well, so that's good.
Yep.
Anthony, the last one for me. We've done a few webinars lately, and obviously webinars have become the new norm in terms of being able to reach out to people and network and talk about things. You're a huge proponent of the fireside format where you're just having a chat rather than pre-prepared questions and things like that. What do you think it is about that makes it so much, well, for me, so much easier to listen to and make, I think it's a lot more informative as well because it goes to different places.
It's the unguarded nature of it, right? That is critical. It's the unguarded moments. Was that a song?
In an unguarded moment.
Yeah, who was that?
I'll just leave you to go.
Sorry.
I think it was the church. Wasn't it?
It was the church. You're right. Yeah. It was the church. Wow, goodness me. So it's a throwback to the 80s. But it is the unguarded moments that are the most brilliant. It's the unexpected pleasure that we never saw coming that is the most pleasurable. And again, a music thing. I remember reading this article about a young music editor that was forced to go and listen to Jefferson Airplane or whatever they were called at that time. I think it was just called. Became Jefferson Starship, and then it was Starship, and it was at an Indian reservation casino. And she was a young reporter, and she was forced to go to it. And she just thought it would be the worst thing that ever happened to her. And in retrospect, it was the highlight of her life. It was the most brilliant thing that she's ever seen. And it was the unexpected pleasure. And I find that the fireside format gives that. We don't really know where it's going. Sometimes, things come out where I might ask you to edit like I did before, where it's a bit too much. But on the whole, I just think it provides a far more informative format, far more interesting thing for listeners and for the interviewers. You don't really know where it's going and you just see what comes out of it. Of course, you have to pick your speakers well. I think the panel that we did the other day was excellent because we had great people on it. And there was some really, really fascinating stuff that came out of it. And knowledge it was great all around. Totally.
So in line with that fireside format, we're going to wrap up. Thanks, Anthony, for taking the time to talk to us and making your time available.
Thank you very much for coming back on.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here after the crazy year we've had, and let's see how things are in 2022. Do it again in a year's time.
Okay.
Sounds good.
It's a deal.
Bye.
See you, Anthony.